During the night time, we all have seen the beautiful sky with twinkling stars. You may think, what causes this twinkling of stars? I tell you, twinkling of stars is due to the phenomenon of atmospheric refraction. What is atmospheric refraction? It is refraction of light by the Earth's atmosphere. Here you need to remember what is atmospheric refraction. It is the refraction of light by the Earth's atmosphere. And twinkling of stars is due to atmospheric refraction of starlight. The starlight, on entering the Earth's atmosphere, undergoes refraction continuously before it reaches to Earth, which means the light of the stars undergo refraction continuously, one after the other. That means multiple refractions will be taking place. So before the light enters into the Earth's atmosphere, it has to undergo refraction continuously. The atmospheric refraction occurs in a medium of gradually changing refractive index. What is refractive index? It is the ratio of speed of light in a vacuum to the speed of light in any specific medium. The medium can be air, it can be glass. So this atmospheric refraction can occur in a medium where there is a gradual change of refractive index. And I just told you what is refractive index. And since the atmosphere bends starlights towards the normal, the apparent position of the star is slightly different from its actual position. Let us understand it with a clear diagram. Atmosphere bends the starlight towards the normal. In this figure, you can clearly see the normal which is drawn. Normal, which means a perpendicular line. So see where the star is written. When the light of star is coming, so that is shown as ray path. In the figure it is shown as ray path. Then it bends towards the normal because there is a change between two medium. Now here the refractive index increases, and we have learned that when there is gradual change in refractive index, that place only atmospheric refraction can occur. Now here, as the light bends slightly, what happens? The apparent position, apparent means clearly visible, or else you can say can be seen. So the position which can be seen of the star is slightly different from its actual position, which we can understand through this figure, because there is a bending of starlight, a ray of starlight. The actual position is different, and the apparent position which is seen, which is visible, that is also different. And this apparent position, which means the position which we are seeing, that is not stationary, but it keeps on changing slightly, since the physical conditions of the Earth's atmosphere are not stationary, as was the case in the phenomenon of atmospheric refraction. What does this mean? The conditions of the Earth's atmosphere are not stationary. As a result, the apparent position of the stars which we see, that is also not stationary. It keeps on changing, and when the apparent position of the stars are changing continuously, we see them twinkling. Since the stars are very distant, they are approximate point sized sources of light. They are very small, point sized. And as the path of the rays of light coming from the stars goes on varying slightly, the apparent position of the stars fluctuate, and the amount of starlight which enters the eye sees them twinkling, and the stars sometimes appear brighter and at some other time fainter, and this is known as twinkling effect of the stars. So twinkling of stars is due to the atmospheric refraction. You may think, if the stars can twinkle, why don't the planets twinkle? So here is the answer. The planets are very much closer to the Earth. On the other hand, we learned that the stars are very distant at very distant places. And since the planets are very much closer to the Earth, they can be seen as extended sources. Whereas the stars are very far, we see them as pointed sources, point sized sources of light. But the planets are very much nearer, so they can be seen as extended sources. If we consider a planet as a collection of large number of point-sized sources of light, the total variation in the amount of light which enters our eye from all the individual point-sized sources will average out to zero, and that is why the twinkling effect will be nullified. What does that mean? If we consider that any one planet is made up of so many point sized sources, then the atmospheric refraction which is done with each point sized sources, so that amount of light from all individual sources will average out to zero, because there are many point sources, and because of that it destroys the twinkling effect, and that is why the planets do not twinkle. Now let us see another example of atmospheric refraction. We'll learn advanced sunrise and delayed sunset. The sun is visible to us about 2 minutes before the actual sunrise and about 2 minutes after the actual sunset, because of atmospheric refraction. So here is another example which we are going to learn. You will remember that sun is visible to us about 2 minutes before the actual sunrise and about 2 minutes after the actual sunset, because of atmospheric refraction. What do we mean by actual sunrise? We mean the actual crossing of the horizon by the sun. Let us see the diagram for it. We all know what is horizon, right? It is the line at which the earth's surface and the sky appears to meet. So, what do we mean by actual sunrise? We mean that the actual crossing of the horizon by the sun. Here in this figure, we can clearly see the actual and apparent position of the sun with respect to the horizon. Here on the upper side, we can see apparent position of the sun. What is the meaning of apparent? Which we see, or you can refer to as which can be seen, which can be visible. So that is the apparent position of the sun, which is visible. But the actual position of the sun is somewhere different. Okay, so this figure shows the positions of the sun, actual and apparent, with respect to horizon, with respect to the line at which earth's surface and the sky appears to meet. And the time difference between actual sunset and the apparent sunset is about 2 minutes. How can we say it? Because we know that as shown in the figure, the actual position of the sun is different and the apparent position of the sun is different with respect to horizon. You can see horizon is the line at which the earth's surface and the sky appears to meet. And here clearly we can see two different positions of the sun. And because of this, the time difference between actual sunset and apparent sunset is about 2 minutes. The apparent flattening of the sun's disk at sunrise and sunset is also due to the same phenomenon. So here we'll remember that the time difference between actual sunset and the apparent sunset is about 2 minutes, and the apparent flattening of sun's disk is also an example of atmospheric refraction. So here we learned examples of advanced sunrise and delayed sunset by the phenomenon of atmospheric refraction.